Not the computer. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Good.
Feel free to speak. We have a small enough group where we can be
Yeah,
interactive.
you won't speak over each other. Just go for it.
So welcome to the January, even though it is no longer January, 2023 Trust the Process. This one is oriented around or related to what can I do with this degree? Hopefully we'll have some other people join us. We'll be focusing on what you can do with a master's degree, what you can do with a doctoral degree, and on whatever questions you have. So we'll start with, since there's a small enough group of you, what are your interests in this field, this degree, which is the first question.
We, Dr. TRW, we have a mix of students. So say what program you're in, if you're in the PhD or the CES program, please. Okay.
Okay, I go first. I am in this clinical mental health master's program. Yeah, so that's where I am right now.
And what do you want to do? What are you thinking right now, roughly?
Okay. Okay, like for now, I'm working towards my internship. Okay. I just got a place, so I'll be starting in August in the fall. Okay. So I'm looking towards it to learn as much as I can, to grab all the experiences I can. That will help me to, to practice. Okay, I want to really be grounded in this field of counseling here.
Michael, real quick, where will you be doing your, like, what population of people will you be working with, and where will you be doing your internship?
Okay, I'll be working with basically the okay, like it's a mixed population, right? I'll be doing my internship with community counseling mediation in Brooklyn. Yeah. Okay, they have a lot of they have about 5 clinics. One of them is that has to do with I mean, people who are addicted to, alcohol and all of that. So I think I really want to really, because I'll be taking a course in addiction, in alcohol addiction, and this next spring. No, this spring, spring 2. So I hope that will help me also to, to do something. Yeah.
And you're still working on getting here, right? From Ghana?
Yes.
Yeah, I could not remember if you're Brooklyn yet, but no, we did the emails earlier this week, didn't we?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Good luck. Let us
did.
know if you need any help then.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm yet to hear from them, to get a reply from them. So I'm hoping that they will reply, so I know what to do next.
Michael,
I'm in the international office.
Where are you?
I'm currently in Ghana, in Cape Coast, Ghana, right now.
What time is it?
It's after 5, almost 5:15, 5:12, 5:13. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Got an international group here. We got Ghana, Canada, and the United States so far.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have
Lisa, thank you. If you get a chance, if you can, just put what kind of your interests are, and maybe where you want to do internship, what you're interested in, why you're in this field. I know you can't speak. We'll just read the chat for you. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
I can go next. I am Lori. I am in the PhD program in counseling or education and supervision, excuse me. I'll be doing my internship with AMRI, where I currently work with Dr. Jones, a mixed population. And what I want to eventually do with my degree, I don't know. I'm not sure just yet. I have a couple years to think about it as far as what I want to do with it. I really do enjoy where I work at. So maybe a director or something in that aspect. Who knows? We'll see.
Perfect. Excellent. Thanks, Laura.
Got two more.
Gabby or Heidi, either one.
All right, I guess I'll go. I'm Gabrielle Johnson. I'm over in Maryland. I'm thinking of using my degree more for the veteran population. Haven't picked an internship yet for the CES doctoral program, but maybe getting into like the VA with federal would be something that I would love to do, just to kind of have a wider, spectrum of experience. And at some point doing some type of teaching. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Last
You
but
know
not
about
least,
Give an Hour? Gabby,
I didn't hear you.
you know about the organization Give an Hour?
No.
It is an organization that allows people who are licensed to volunteer their times to work with either like groups who have been affected by trauma, by veterans and their families, and you give an hour, or it can be more than 1 hour, to work with them online. So if
Okay.
being alone, interested or connected with veteran populations is something that may be of interest to you, that's something you may want to look into. I'm happy to put the link in the chat if that's
I
something.
really appreciate that, Dr. Raj. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
So you want us to know what we want to do with our degree? Is that the question?
yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to multitask, so I've been half listening, if I'm being honest. So what do I want to do? So I kind of want to combine everything, all of my degrees. So undergrad is criminal justice and legal studies, obviously master's in clinical mental health, and then education and supervision. So, like it was said before, I live in Minnesota. Very passionate about the community that is either in incarceration or coming out of incarceration. Additionally, also want to do like more trauma work, like brain spotting trauma stuff with
Oh, cool.
like gun violence individuals, and also work on like teaching like curriculum that's useful for people coming into the field to properly work with high levels of individuals of trauma that don't look like them, because I feel like when we don't look like people, we do a very bad job and we show up incorrectly. So that's all.
That's good, and that's a lot.
A research topic.
Yeah, it is.
My research topic, so I'm either thinking about doing like how like the misdiagnosis of the incarcerated population and how they get like all misdiagnosis.
Yep.
But then like I don't know, like I have like some other things that I'm interested in too. So like I have to think about the other two that I will be submitting. So I'm not for sure, but super passionate about like the misdiagnosis and how we over medicate individuals and not look at cultural and trauma pieces, as opposed to like giving them these high level diagnoses and don't look into like cultural aspects and just give them a whole slew of crap that sticks with them.
Cool. I have a question. Different cultures in general, or is there a particular culture you're slightly more interested in?
I would say like really focusing on like African American men. Like our crime rates right here are skyrocketing, and then also like I'm also thinking about possibly focusing on the trauma of like police, like we constantly have all of that. So like something in reference to
So criminal justice law enforcement related.
breaking down the system, kicking it down, and hopefully changing it somehow.
Okay, cool. Actually, you know what? Dr. TRW, Lori, Gabby, being in the doc program, do you have an idea of what you want to do with your dissertations? Roughly. I mean, it's a
Good
very large
question.
funnel. It's a very large funnel right now. Don't worry. It can
I was
be,
actually thinking about it yesterday too. I
Okay.
was actually thinking about it and I really don't know just yet. Really don't know. Because there's so many good topics that I think that need to be discussed that, I mean, I'm not sure. It's funny because I actually, for my supervisory, I have this week with Dr. Jones. I kind of want to talk to her a little bit to see what she did, not copy off of her, but just kind of get some ideas from her.
of course.
So yeah, that's what I'm doing this week for my supervisory.
Awesome. Gabby?
So I'm going back and forth. Suicide is one of the things that I'm really trying to cue in on protocol, whether it's for the military, and now that I'm doing mobile crisis, I'm actually at work right now. That is like the top calls that we get, which is for suicide, which I just took again. So I'm trying to figure out like either what's the protocol for military, why it's not working, why their numbers are higher, or which the other thing is for schools. We get a lot of calls from schools. So I'm trying to see maybe if assessing the protocol for schools, like maybe it's training. I don't know how to like verbally state it, but it's between those two. And then my second, of course, is grief. And I'm seeing that grief affects everything. And so basically trying to state that between that. And so I probably might want to sit with you at some point, Dr. Dickson, pick your brain and see if I could formulate my words correctly.
Okay.
And I may just have something. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So we're going to start with, I'll tell you what the itinerary is. We're going to start with something called the Mental Health Sisters and its cousins, talk about the history of the field briefly, and then we'll tell you a little bit about how we ended up in this field and move into options for these degrees in this, under this umbrella of counseling. We'll just call it counseling. So the Mental Health Sisters, when I was in my doctoral program, I went to the University of Akron, and we had a really interesting setup in that if you had 12 people in a class, 6 of them in the doc program were in counselor education and supervision, and the other 6 would be in counseling psychology. So we took our classes together. And then we had a master's program in clinical mental health counseling in the College of Education. And then there was also the PhD program that was 2 buildings down in the School of Psychology. So we had just all these different people going on. We had the PhD in counselor ed, we had the PhD in counseling psych only. Then we had the MA PhD counseling psychology people. Then we had the BA psych people, and then we had the MA people and counselor education and CMHC. It was
Did your school happen to have a medical school that also trained psychiatrists?
We had the medical school was it wasn't actually affiliated with the University of Akron. It was nearby. So we had all of these different people, and people would come into the clinic. We also had this thing called the Clinic for Child Study and Family Therapy, which is kind of similar to the VCTC. We were a community counseling center. So anybody from the community could come in and get free counseling there. And they were either seen by a CMHC student, supervised by a doc student, or by the doc students. In this clinic, we had 2-way mirrors. You could just go and watch sessions whenever you wanted to behind the glass. Everything was recorded. It was really an awesome setup. I liked my doctoral program, 97% of it I liked, but I loved that part. And then down 2 buildings over in the psych department, they had the counseling center for the students. So if you were a student at the university, you went there. If you were a community member, you went here. What that created was amazing access to mental health services and utter confusion, because students would be like, I don't know what program I'm in, because there were just so many different things. And this is not even including whatever social work had going on. This was just counseling and counseling psych. So I created a story for one of my supervisees that just kind of snowballed. And what I told this person is that medicine and philosophy went to a bar. They met and they really liked each other. And they decided, you know what? Maybe we'll make it a sports bar. Maybe they have something to eat. They're at this place. They said, you know what? We like each other. We're going to give this idea of having a family a go. And they had 5 children. They're all girls because it just made it easier. The oldest daughter they named Psychiatry. She's 17. She's really smart. She's kind of into drugs, but otherwise she's pretty smart. Then there was the sister right underneath her named psychology, who was 16, kind of looked up to psychiatry, who was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, leave me alone. And psychology looked up to her, but kind of had some of her own things going on too, not quite so much into drugs, also still very smart. Then there were the fraternal twins, social work and counseling. They were focused on resources and strengths and wellness, and not necessarily what's sick about you, but what's well about you. And then mom comes home with this weird baby they name marriage and family therapy. And everybody's like, why is she here? Because we can do that. We don't need her. So these sisters all fight in the house. Psychiatry will go in and take a shower, to, take 6 hours and use up all the hot water. Psychology might take the car. Everybody else got to walk to school. Counseling and social work come with these quinoa pancakes for breakfast. And everybody's like, we don't want that. The marriage and family therapy is like, let's all talk about it. So there's all this weirdness in the house because everybody has their own role. But for some reason, it bumps the heads. One of them in particular is irritated by everybody else. So in the house, they all fight constantly because they have so many similarities in what they do, and they want to all have their place and be seen. But if they go out on the cul-de-sac where they live, and like the history family or the geology family or the mathematics family or the English family says anything about the mental health sisters, they will all turn on you and fight you to the death. So they will support each other against others. But when it comes to being in the house with themselves, they have silly fights over nothing because they are all useful, needed, and necessary when it comes to treating people. Does that make sense? Okay, so that would be the mental health sisters. Then we got cousins. We got like ABA. We got all these other supplemental groups of family members who treat in their own right, are also useful, but sometimes get caught up in the fight a little bit too. So when we look at the field overall, medicine was the origin of what we're doing as counselors. Sigmund Freud gets so much credit. He was a physician, but he gets so much credit for all of these fields. When we study theory, we are studying largely what he considered theory. And while Freud had a lot to offer, Freud had a couple of interesting things too. If you ever read about his life, dude had some stuff, but he and his work are often what we consider the foundation of all of these fields in some way. But one thing to keep in mind is psychiatry kind of has its own thing because they are physicians, they go to medical school. The big bumps often in real life, if we're keeping it real, come between psychology and something else. So psychology often is the field that people in these various mental health professions study undergrad, because many places don't have, in Canada, there's a bachelor's in counseling, but a lot of places don't have a bachelor's in counseling. So many people who come into the counseling field have psychology backgrounds, sometimes social work backgrounds because they have a social work undergrad, sometimes education backgrounds, but overwhelmingly, as the person who does admissions for this program, it's psychology. My bachelor's degree is in psychology. That's the foundation. Psychology, though, had a little bump in the road where, you have to have a doctorate to generally practice psychology. In the late 60s or 70s, when mental health facilities were deinstitutionalized and they were letting folks go, psychology still decided you need a doctorate practice up in here, so don't know what's going to happen. And counseling was like, I got an idea. How about we let you independently practice at the master's level? We'll do that. And there were lots of people who did community counseling at the master's level, and that was where a lot of our momentum as a field came to be. And then psychology was kind of like, I don't like that. I don't want you to do this. This is not okay. And lots of tension developed, and you still see vestiges of it now between counseling and psychology, and then some of the other mental health sisters too. And then counseling was like, oh, you don't like me doing counseling? I got one for you. I'm gonna do clinical counseling. So psychology has clinical and counseling psych, counseling has counseling and clinical counseling. So you see a lot of overlap because at the end of the day, as evidenced by a book written by this guy named Dawes back in the 80s or 90s, at the end of the day, if you build rapport and you have connection and skill, clients really just want whoever can understand them. And counseling and psychology do a lot to focus on skills. Social work does too now because there have been developments in social work where it's not resource oriented only. There's clinical social work. There are psychiatrists who do counseling. There's so many different pieces. And then marriage and family therapy, while they focus primarily on couples, marriage and family, sometimes they will also see individual clients. So there's so much interconnection between all the fields. And I'm not bashing psychology. I actually am licensed as a psychologist. I'm licensed as a counselor. So I don't feel bad saying those things because I know that those are true. We do have a lot of weird interplay between all of us. So that is the foundation we want you to have. And then we'll talk about how we got here. I'll let you start, Dr. Dickson, then I'll talk, and then we'll move into our options.
Oh, goodness. How far are we gonna go back? Do we want to go bachelor's degree or start at master's degree? Where do we go? Okay, all right. So I have my bachelor's degree and my first master's degree are both in human development. And honestly, I was going to go into research and probably get my PhD at that time. But, you know, things like life happens and stuff happens like that. And, you know, I'm old enough that back then it was hard to have classes. There was no flexibility. It was hard to find classes that would work for a working person, right? We didn't have all this hybrid and online stuff and all that. So I did a ton of research. I was ready to get an academic job. Life happened. I went to work instead. During that time, I go into social services. I worked in community mental health for, I don't know, 15 years, criminal justice for about another 13, 14 years, all told since I was about 19 years old. I've worked in the field in some way. And so ironically, I went and got my counseling degree because I was like, you know what? Yeah, I like this counseling thing. It's kind of a way to, you know, get a promotion in the field, especially since I was working a lot in criminal justice and doing some research and stuff like that, and seeing lots of clients for all. I mean, it would take us a while to cover all the populations, but especially courts, drug and alcohol, every type of criminal justice, federal prisons, state prisons, blah, 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 all of that stuff. Well, so then I decided, you know, I'd rather do the counseling part of it. Really like that and all. One of my professors there in my counseling program was like, hey, you know, you should consider the PhD program. I didn't for a long time. But then the truth was I decided I want to get a little teaching practice and get a little adjunct money, see how this goes. There's a junior college not far from here, and I happen to know one of the people that ran it. And the other place, one of the other places wasn't going to hire us because they were a private school and basically just honestly hired their own. So I went in there, applied for a job. I was replacing the person who told me I should go there. So our degrees were exactly the same. He was in a doc program at the time, but did not have it. And honestly, he even said, he's like, you got way more experience than I do. You should apply for this job. I apply. She says, no, we need somebody with a master's, because I had a master's in human development and a master's in counseling at this point. Wasn't good enough for her. She wanted a master's in psych. I'm going to avoid my feelings on the master of psych because I don't really know what the point of the degree is, because most people who have a master's in psych probably was trying to do something else. So I was like, fine, whatever. So she made me mad. And I'm like, fine, I'm gonna go find a PhD program just to spite this lady. So I'm not kidding. The next week, I am on the phone, admissions, enrolling in a counselor CES program, not realizing that I would actually really enjoy it. And you know, I wanted to teach, but when I got into it, that research part of me just always kind of kept coming up. Unlike Lori, I was not interested in being an administrator very much, but I always found myself being stuck doing administrative things. I was a chair within my second year of graduating with a PhD. And I'm just like, oh gosh, you know. But then I found out as I got more into it and interacted with people, all the millions of different things we could do with our degree and the different things. And we'll talk about some of the things we can do with our degrees later. But then I realized that I kind of picked well, because I bounced back and forth. Should I go to clinical psych? No, I kind of didn't like those people very much. Should I go this? Should I go that route? You know, I could have just gone back to human development and become a research professor. That's pretty much what they do. And that was pretty much it. And suddenly, I don't know, how long we've been here now, Tiffany? I think I've been here 3 years now, almost 3 years. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
6.
You've been here 5 or 6.
Yeah, I had to count. 6 here and then 14 at that other place that I forgot about. Okay, so my path into this field was it started very, very early. My first 2 professional influences were Lucy from Charlie Brown and Wile E. Coyote. Both had little booths where you could do psychology. And I think Lucy charged a nickel for psychiatric services. She was a psychiatrist, but I was interested in that. That had my eye from the beginning. I always wanted to be a physician or whatever Lucy was doing. So that was really the entry point. High school, took a psychology class. This person was very oriented around Freud, and my English teacher in high school had a PhD and was a psychoanalyst, which I could talk for years about that dude, just to understand how he ended up. Long story with him, was not my favorite person, but he tried to psychoanalyze a lot of us in class. So there was some inappropriate stuff going on, but then there was an interesting piece going there. I would kind of maybe like to do that appropriately and ethically, but still my interest was piqued by some of the stuff that I learned in high school. After that, let's see, took notes so I could keep myself on course. I developed an interest in high school in eating disorders. I wanted to work eating disorders, which is where that whole, do I go mental health or do I go physical health? Because both of those areas would be appropriate for that particular topic. So I didn't know if I wanted to go to med school, go to grad school. Went through undergrad, started off as a psych major, switched from a psych major to a bio major, psych major, bio major, general studies for a minute because I didn't know which one of those two, and ultimately realized I can get out of here a little bit faster with a psych degree. And maybe I can go to my dream college, which I don't even remember why it was my dream college. It's in the area where I live. Wanted to go to John Carroll University. And this is where the counseling piece came in for me. Wanted so badly to go to John Carroll, got into John Carroll undergrad, chose not to go. Went to Ohio State, went to Cleveland State, and then ultimately decided, let me see what John Carroll's graduate program in psych looks like. Because they have a bachelor's in psych. And when I called, they said, we don't have a program in psychology at the master's level. So my question was, thank goodness, well, where do your psych people go? And they said, we have a counseling program. I was like, okay, I'll try that. Knew nothing more about it. Applied for this program, was accepted to the program during my senior year of college. And then one of my last classes in my senior year, was about the professions, the mental health professions. And this professor told us basically horrible things about counseling, how they were basically a ripoff program. They don't really do just all these horrible things. And what she introduced me to was that antagonistic relationship that sometimes exists between psychology and counseling specifically. There is enough room at the table for everybody to have a seat, but this particular person did not like counselors, just not sure exactly how it became that intense for her. But it kind of sparked a little fire in me. So learned about the antagonism, learned about the need for collaborative relationships. Another professor did talk about there's room at the table for all of us. So if you want to work with eating disorders, you better have a lot of chairs at your table because you will need physicians, you will need social workers, you will need psychologists, you will need everybody's got to be there, especially if this person is really compromised health-wise. So needed both sides of that. The other thing I learned in that experience and my many jobs, I worked at children's services, I've worked in private practice primarily. I did go to John Carroll, got that degree, and then I taught there during my doctoral internship. So I learned a whole lot about what ultimately in my doctoral program was called the Boulder model. Are you familiar with the Boulder model? Boulder model came out of a conference that was in Boulder, Colorado, I think in the 1980s. And the purpose of that was to show how in these PhD programs and social service oriented professions, you need to know how to teach, research, supervise, you need to do advocacy, you need to do leadership, the things that we do in our doctoral program. The Boulder conference highlighted those things. And what it said to me was you have to understand the duality of your identity. So I am a Black American woman. I'm a Black Canadian woman. So there's a duality there. And even with being Black American, I'm often called African American. So there's a hyphen that joins my identities when I'm on the side of the border where I was actually born. I'm in Canada today. I'll be in the States again tomorrow because I'm in both every single week. I learned about how important it is to have linguistic duality because I speak more than one language, all these different things, and how to have a professional appreciation for the duality in our mental health professions and how we can take what we learn in this field and apply it to the others. There is no hard demarcation. So I don't feel like I'm at any disadvantage having a doctorate in counseling or having a counseling license or a psych license or anything. I can do pretty much whatever I want to do. And it helps in all of the work. Right now, I'm doing the associate chair work here in this program. I have a private practice. I do work for the NFL. There's different stuff that I get to do, all based on those counseling degrees and the experiences. All right, now, Dr. Dickson, what can we do with these degrees?
Oh, man, you just listed them off. So, when from a clinical mental health and from a CES perspective, obviously we counsel, right? Like we know that's what several of you want to do, right? You want to continue counseling, you want to direct counseling, you want to be some way deeply involved in our field, right? And we can absolutely do that. And then a lot of people don't understand when they come in that counselor education programs are, make sure I wrote this correctly, Dr. TRW, they do help strengthen skills that you already have. They help you advance some skills that you already have as a counselor, but they are not intended like PhDs in psychology and other things like that. They're not intended for the purpose of training clinical people. We come in with the expectation that you're a well-trained clinician when you walk in the door. We may help you with some of the classes you take. So we've had students ask us before, well, why do I have to do a 100-hour practicum? I mean, I did all this before, I'm a CMHC programmer. Why do I have to do a practicum? Why can't I double up and get this practicum thing out of the way and this internship and all this stuff out of the way? Because we want to see, for CES students, we need to assess your skills and assume that we were correct when we let you in, that you were already a stellar clinician in the practicum counseling part of it. For you, Michael, we want to know over a period of time how you manage and how you learn through a year's full of practicum, internship, working with clients, working all of those things. But then we get into those other areas. We get into all those other areas of what we can do with our degree, which does not necessarily limit, say, Michael. Because we train at all the levels for you to be able to do. Let's start with leadership desk. We train at all levels for you to be able to do leadership things. I know people, I work with people who make almost twice as much money that I do, that have masters in counseling. It's all they have. One of them was, he was in my doc cohort. He realized that he makes enough money and there was no benefit for a degree because he wasn't interested in doing anything further than doing what he's doing as a clinician. So he goes out and gets every certification he can, and him and his wife own the office I'm sitting in, and that's what they do. They're clinicians, they're specialized clinicians. There's no point in them going and getting a degree that adds more to what they already do. But for you guys, and they're directors of their own places. So, but leadership is more than that when you get into the PhD program. We're going to teach higher ed leadership. We're going to teach things like, what is it like to be in our positions? What is it like to be a director of clinical training at a university level or at a site? Make you better trained for those kind of things, make you trained for doing what I do as a director of clinical training, make you trained to do things that Dr. TRW and Dr. Foster do as department chairs. I mentioned before as a department chair before, that helps you really understand the nuances of higher education. We want you guys to have those experiences from us where we can share that information so you understand what you're getting into from a leadership perspective. It can make you community leaders. I am on several, chaired several boards. I'm on several committees and different things in the community where they want our expertise from not just counseling, but from our perspective. There's a lot of management taught in our leadership program evaluation courses, things like that you learn that are just unseen things. People come into programs thinking, oh, I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to come here and learn to do a little teaching. But we do so much more than that. Anything else I missed in leadership there? I mean, there's just so much that we can do that all day.
No, I think it's also interesting too, when you think about the types of opportunities in this work that we don't even realize are available until they come to us. So for instance, I mentioned doing work with professional athletes. I didn't, even though I have an independent connection to that team. I had an uncle who played for this team when I was a kid. I had no idea that professional sports teams had clinicians, mental health clinicians. I didn't know. Nobody ever told me. I'm pretty sure they may not have even had them when he was there. I'm sure he wasn't using them. Now that I do that work, when I go to the meetings of all the clinicians, it's interesting to see how many of them are master's level counselors. And it's certainly not an option anybody ever provided to me as something that one could do. For football, baseball, basketball, one does the Special Olympics, or people who travel with these teams, and they cater to how these various athletes are oriented to their sport and oriented to their lives as two separate things. Who knew? Had no idea that was even a thing. The administrative pieces of this field, sometimes you don't realize who exactly is writing these courses, who has decided that this particular thing is important in the field. What is K-Prep about? What is it? Why is it necessary? Who sits on the board? I know somebody who was just elected to a really high, just got a really high position in K-Prep, who didn't even really have a lot of orientation around it until they became a professional. So if we can get you guys to learn and understand these pieces of the field before you graduate, it opens up the field much wider to you. I just got a text
Quickly,
message.
yeah.
Yes.
Much more quickly.
Much more quickly. I got a text message just now while we're talking, and I'll have to go back and answer it later, from the person who really, I would give a huge amount of credit for me understanding the field. And she is the chair of a program in Ohio. And she also has done incredible stuff. I met her our first week of the doctoral program. So I was 24 and she was 23. So we were pretty young in the program. She had apparently read everything about counseling, had memorized it, because she knew her stuff, and that you need to do this and this thing and that thing. And I think she's published in excess of 60 articles. She just does all this stuff. She is really, really heavily involved in the field. Listening to her and knowing the kind of things that she knew about the field opened my eyes to seeing this field is wide open. I know people who've taken their counseling degrees and gone into advertising. There's so much that you can do with this degree, with this training, that is beyond only talking to people and helping support them through personal issues. There's all kinds of stuff. So the field is wide open to you. Please don't put yourself in a box. You can do 97. The problem is you can do 97 things all at once.
That is the problem.
Maybe 98.
See, and then from leadership, the natural tie to advocacy,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably, safe to say, probably one of the most encouraged things about our field, right? Like, everyone's very interested in advocacy, getting after advocacy. I mean, Heidi, it's what you were talking about. You were speaking to advocacy right there, right off the top. It's funny, all of y'all want to do something a little different, but all of you kind of spoke in a different area of the different field of different things that we train you on, and you'll get experience. So students get grumpy in PhD programs, because they sometimes don't fully understand why we put them through the ringer on some things. Like, let's be honest, let's say live labs, right? Our choice in doing something like that is give those people who are scared to death, but want to learn how to teach, a chance to be up in front of smaller groups of people. So kind of getting you ready to get all the way down to the teaching class, where you're going to go into class and learn how to teach. You'll take classes on how to teach. You'll take classes on advocacy and how to advocate for your clients, your community, all kinds of topics. That's what lands us on some of the, thank you. That's what lands us on some of the boards is, I've been on a couple of community level boards where most of the work was advocacy related, workforce advocate related, community related. You do a lot of that advocacy. A lot of I can't even think of all the different types of advocacy you can do. More than likely, you're doing it now and probably don't even know it because you did put a label to it. But as clinical mental health people, you're probably already advocating for your own clients. You're advocating for your own communities. All of y'all talk to some level of advocacy. Lori, Gabby, Michael, Heidi, all of you, everything that y'all talked about, y'all all talked about some form of advocacy. I want to speak for, y'all said veterans. I want to speak for criminal justice folks. I want to be a director at a community. There's no way Lori's a director at a community. She's not an advocate at the same time. Michael wants to work with this population with substance abuse. He's going to be an advocate for those people. Him and Heidi may find something in common because they both want to work with this, because of the overlap with substance abuse and criminal justice. And like we were talking about earlier, I mean, like, my, oh, 15 plus years in criminal justice was, working with specialty courts. So those were veterans courts, criminal courts that were like for substance abusers, or we had some that was for courts that were for high risk offenders that we would work with and bring them into specialty programs. Any kind of population you can think of within criminal justice, we had a specialty court for those people who were who needed that extra work and advocacy and things. Then like you were saying, teaching, what else can we add to teaching? I mean, a lot of people come to the program wanting to learn how to teach. I originally came in just because I wanted to get a little side gig adjuncting, and then, well, that lasted all of about no time. And suddenly before I even graduate, I end up having my first full-time position. So you don't know where you're going to end up going.
That's true.
Add to teaching or advocacy, Dr. Chirdaby?
It's interesting teaching, and this is something for all of you to keep in mind when it comes to your practicum and internship placements and sites. Many people end up working wherever they did some of that field work. So I did some of my doctoral teaching, at John Carroll, and then I was hired initially adjunct, and then I rolled into another university, and then ultimately ended up here. But you just never know where these different opportunities will arise. The other thing is be very creative. I hear people saying, can I just start a private practice? I have a practice, and we've been in practice.
They'll do.
Yeah, mine, I think all of us do, since 2005 for my practice, but I started in private practice even before that. So I worked for 7 years at the place where I did my doctoral internship. And then 5 of us in that practice of 17 decided to open up our own thing. In part for me, I was moving to Canada, and I needed to be able to work someplace that would only allow me to work on weekends or every other weekend initially. And that other practice, I understand completely why that was not interesting to her. But for me, if it's my own practice, I can just see those clients who only wanted to come in on Saturday or Sunday and come back from Canada's 5-hour drive for me almost, and opened up that practice. Was it a simple just open a practice? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. It wasn't as difficult as I thought.
That's going to be my question for you is
Sure,
opening,
yeah.
like, what are the steps in opening a practice?
Ooh, so that's an entire course, but go ahead.
It was interesting. So with me initially, there were a group of 5 of us. There's still 4 of us who worked together, and we found a space. We got the LLCs that we needed to own our own little name and blah, blah, blah. Got the practice, and actually just went from there. We didn't have some huge amount of money saved up. For me, it was very interesting because I was going back and forth between 2 countries. And we were earlier looking at, like, can we use Skype for counseling? And then eventually there was a DCC, the distance counseling credential. Got that thing that turned into the board certified telemental health provider credential. So I've been doing telehealth for a really long time. As soon as Ohio said this is legal, and was like, cool. Legal to you, it'll be legal to me. Can I be in Toronto and do this sometimes? And had to figure out all of those pieces too, but I didn't have to have some gigantic bucket of money to start the practice. I needed my laptop and a couple of people who went in with me to have a physical office. Most of my clients I do see in the physical practice. I go back to Ohio every weekend. I'll go back tomorrow morning and drive my down there. But
I did the same thing. Yeah, with me, now granted, one thing probably a little different because you were pretty stable in your career and you had an income from your
that
PhD.
place, I forgot. Yeah,
that place you had. So what I always tell master's students, like, and to be honest, is like, unless you're kind of like independently wealthy, it's not hard to set it up and get it going. Do you just need the clientele quick enough? So I always encourage people, and I did it differently. Because I've moved a few times. I've set up practice 3 times now. When you do that, you obviously go through all the stuff of getting your MPI numbers and getting your license numbers in those states and blah, blah, blah. But really, it is as easy as finding a place, having the income to get yourself up and running, and then finding the clientele. I always say, go to work for someone, work for some place. Do these things slowly. That's what I did the first time. Do them slowly, and then you eventually quit that one paying job, and you're doing your clients all on your own. And then what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that while I love where I am right now, this is the most stable place I've worked. So I've never had one job. I remember in my doc program one day waking up crying, going, I don't even know where I go to work today because there was just so much going on. So while I worked in private practice at that other setting, I was adjunct teaching at John Carroll. Then I moved into my own practice when I started working at that other university, which was not, there's so many things associated with that place, but it didn't feel like the most stable place. So I was there, but I still had my practice. But thank goodness I wasn't in practice alone. I had my practice mates. So I kind of knew that even if I wasn't making a ton of money, we weren't going to lose the space, because there were a couple of months where things got a little bit lean, and we found a way to figure it out. Now it is better because I still have those same practice mates. This job is much healthier than probably any other university. Well, John Carroll was okay, but than that other place where I worked for many years. And I feel like I have the support that I need and understanding from colleagues and other people how to make a practice work. There have been bumps in the road, hiccups, and I've learned from those things. So please ask people who are in practice.
Yes.
What went right? What went wrong? How can I do this? Do I need $50,000? I heard somebody say that they needed $50,000.
I usually say about 10, and that's about what you need to cover 2 or 3 months of income to survive while you're doing the other things. And then to add to what you're saying, when I came back to Texas, because we had to come back here because my wife's parents had some health issues and we returned here, there was a point where I had on paper 6 jobs, literally 6 jobs, because of the contract work I was doing. And this is the first time in my life I think I have maybe 3. And it's like, oh, okay, 3. Like, I get bored sometimes. It's kind of weird. But the really good thing about like you're saying, Lori, with the private practice part of it is, here, I'm going to be completely honest. If you go into what me and Dr. TRW are doing now, where we have full-time salaries doing our job, but the expectation is that we do have some clinical work and we do some work so we stay sharp. Plus, we want to stay sharp. I want to have clients. Keep an eye out for the fact that if you're applying for jobs, if they don't want you to have your clinical work on the side, you don't want to be there because they're not interested in clinical training, to be honest. And to be 100% blunt, when it comes to my clients here, what's really awesome about now for people like me and TRW is we can choose our clientele. I get to choose the interesting ones. I can turn it, and this sounds horrible, but it's true. I don't do depressed, wealthy, private pay people very well. It's just not who I am. It's not where I came from. I can't handle it. I can't, like I jokingly say, I can't do tennis moms. It's not going to happen. And business dads, I can't do that crap. And business moms and blah, all the combination. Can't do it. I pick and choose who I see, but at the same time, because our field can be lucrative, we make decent money in all the side gigs in our job that honestly, my private practice is pretty much a tax write-off. I write off more in rent and other things at the end of the year that protects me from paying so many taxes on the side stuff I did. We're running low on time. For example, one thing you can do is me and Dr. Colarusso got together. So I was on a board and still with a group in Nebraska, and they wanted us to train their entire state on site supervision, their entire state. They offered us $7,500 to write a 4-hour curriculum and present it. It took us a total of about 15 hours. So y'all can do the math. 15 hours at $7,500 that we split. $3,375. So that's it's a 1099 for us. So we didn't pay tax on that. So we do a lot of things that you can do in the community like that, doing consultations and things like that we do. I'm sure Dr. TRW can tell you about some consultations. I've done others where I get paid. I have you can sign up multiple contracts. When I said I had 6 jobs at one point, 3 of those were contract work. 3 were previous employers, the courts, different ones. But when they pay you, all that stuff's 1099 money. You need to worry about your taxes and stuff. Yeah. So, if you're pulling in 40, 50, 60, my peers clear about it, and they're married. They clear, and I'm not kidding, almost $200,000 each as counselors a year. They are very good at what they do, and they can charge as much as a psychiatrist because they're so well known. That's also 1099 money. You can imagine you got to put back 30% of $400,000 to pay your taxes. So those are things you think about, but we have such a lucrative career that we can make money. And we won't even have time today to go into how you can make money and do things in supervision, research scholarship, writing grants, all of these things that Michael can, some of which you can do that you'll be able to do with your CMHC degree. You guys with your working on your PhDs definitely can do. Yeah, do you have any closing remarks? And I guess then we're going to want to do 2 weeks, do another one.
Yeah, well, we're going to do part 2 of this in a couple of weeks if people are interested in hearing some more that you can do with this degree.
How much we can do.
There's so much you can do. I can't even imagine what you can't do. The one thing we can't do is prescribe medications, but with compact
Some
begin.
states, we're getting close.
Well, I'm going to say with compact starting, just like psychology has PsyPac and some 6 states let psychologists prescribe certain medications. So I can't imagine that we wouldn't at least be exploring those opportunities and possibilities. There's very little that we can't do.
Yeah, there are states right now that are working to allow us to prescribe medications that are non-controlled substances. So they're not going to let us do the anti-anxiety. None of us are going to be allowed to, put some Klonopin out there in the world, but we sure could put some Paxil out there, So no, there's a whole another half of what we can do. And I would say me and Dr. TRW didn't even we didn't touch on the things we've been able to do in our careers that you guys will be able to do to help.
So we know we told you guys an hour. What we're going to invite you to do is if you have any questions to email those questions to us. And then when we start part 2, we'll begin with whatever questions we have from this for you guys to start off. So you should have both of our email addresses, but I'm going to make sure that you
look in that room. Yep, I've got an email from every person in this room. So yep, they do.
Okay, so send us an email with whatever questions you have, and then in 2 weeks, is that when we'll do the next time?
Yep.
In 2 weeks, we'll do same time, same spot. The
Yeah,
other
we'll
half,
cover, what would that be? We'll cover research and scholarship, so writing books and making money and what you can do, and how you can make money as a supervisor. This would all still apply to you too, Michael. How you can do things with, what am I forgetting? Supervision, research, scholarship,
teaching,
teaching. Probably talk a little bit more about teaching, more practice things you can do.
and how you can bring your own lived experiences into this field. So I am so distracted by you are actually in Ghana right now. There's so much you can do to connect
I love it.
those experiences to whatever you choose to do. And I was going to say here in the States, but I'm not even in the States, but in the US. So there's so much you can do. And even distracted by you, did you say, Heidi, that you're in Minnesota? Yeah, there's so much energy in Minnesota around police interactions with communities of color, and just there's.
Yeah, and it's really crazy funny about that. If you go back to community mental health, when they allowed people out of the hospitals and stuff like that, then they started developing ACT teams, assertive community treatment teams. That came out of a Minnesota model. So it's really funny to me that Minnesota has all the issues they have when they're the grandfather of releasing people from hospitals into the community and supporting.
We can connect.
Yeah, it's crazy, and that's one of those things I did for about 5 years. So yeah, those things it's crazy to us. So there's a million more things we can cover.
You got George Floyd in Minnesota too, so at least there's a lens and an eye looking at what happens in this particular state. Not that there aren't 49 other states that deserve.
I live in Texas. Start the joke.
I'm from Ohio.
Yeah, but
everybody in Florida, but then we cover the trifecta of stupid.
My brother's in Florida, so I am
Heidi.
in no way judging Minnesota in any way, shape, or form, but there's so much that we can do if you're looking at reform. There's a ton.
And so next week, if we get to when we're talking about research, we can talk more about dissertation topics and the processes and things like that too.
And let me end with this. Please keep in mind the importance of research. Research is truth, or at least what people believe to be truth. If you publish it, people believe it is real, it is true. So we have to make sure that research is accurately and well done and represents what we really want people to know and understand. When you publish it, And we can talk, maybe we will next time, about this one researcher who one of my professors thought was just the know-it-all. And this
Yeah.
person, once his research fell out of favor and people found out exactly what he really was doing, it created some huge bumps in the road for what people believed to be true of intelligence between and within
Oh,
race.
him. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that dude, who was actually really, he's Canadian, but he did a whole lot in the US about eugenics. He was essentially a eugenicist. So we can talk about it. If you publish it, it's considered truth. In this field, we do our own share of publishing. We have to be aware of how powerful that is and how it affects and influences people's lives. Be real. So on that warm, happy, fuzzy note, I will wrap up and still invite you, please, to send us questions. And I hope that you will come back in 2 weeks for the other half of this.
Yeah. And of course, our office is always open for any further chats, anything that comes up. All right, see you later.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lori. See ya. Bye,
Thank you for
Michael.
your time, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. From Ghana.
Donna, yeah, I've been talking to him. He's trying to get,
Oh,
yeah, he's trying to get his, what's it called for school? D something. We were emailing back and forth, and I sent him to the international office and told him if he didn't hear from them